Ar-Rahman Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Maulana wa Habibina wa Shafiina Muhammadin wa alihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyatihi ajma'in. Klein is able to pass off here. Klein is able to pass off the dilemma that he himself sees only at the cost of a deliberate category mistake. And dilemma was that he wants to avoid relativistic consequences, but he also wants to maintain the perspective of an observer. So apparently for Habermas, if this is the dilemma in the sense that probably if you insist on seeing rationality through the eye of an empirical observer, you are choosing for relativism in some sense. And the category mistake is that these are two different categories: the category of rationality and the category of observation. So if you try to understand one in rationality in terms of the category of observation, you are somehow committing a category mistake. That's what I understand. That's what I am understanding at this point. Okay. Philosophers often talk about category mistake. Okay. So this is one of the definition of category mistake. I've just copied it from Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They have a whole article on that if you want to have a look at it. So according to this, and this is apparently Stevenson's definition, the error of assigning to something a quality or action which can only properly be assigned to things of another category. So for example, treating an abstract concept as if it had a physical location, for example. So that's a category mistake. So if I for example, obviously not all philosophers will agree with the example, but for example, if I treat whiteness, an abstract concept, as if it has physical existence, in the same way as a white thing has, for example, a white paper has a physical existence. So if I treat in a sentence whiteness and a white paper, a specific white paper, at the same level, then I'm making some sort of category mistake. And in this example, probably Habermas is saying that Klein's category mistake is that he is treating rationality, which is a different category, at the same way or the same level as another category, which is empirical observation. So that's what I think Habermas is talking about here. Anyway, it will become clearer as we go along. Obviously, in modern philosophy, the most famous use of category mistake The term is of the British philosopher Gilbert Ryle in his book The Concept of Mind, where he says that the idea that mind works in a similar yet altogether separate way to the body is due to a category mistake. So the concept of mind, according to the way we talk about mind as if it has a separate existence, is a category mistake. So that's the just to give you a flair of what philosophers mean by category mistake. Okay, so Klein is able to pass off the dilemma that he himself sees only at the cost of a deliberate category mistake. He requires, so that's now he's explaining how it is it requires of the logic of argumentation, that rationality, to a task that could only be carried out by a nomological theory of observable behavior. Nomological theory is theory based on observation. Let's see what it actually means specifically. So the dictionary definition of nomological is of relating to laws, especially the laws of nature, and its origin is in Greek word nomos, which is used in classical Arabic as well, namus, but it has a variety of meaning of namus in Arabic. But namus in Greek just means law. So nomological theory, I guess, is a theory which is a law-like theory, especially a theory which based on the idea of a law of nature. So to try to understand rationality cannot be understood, or it can be, but shouldn't be understood according to Habermas nomologically, because rationality is based on freedom and norms. It's normative. On the other hand, laws are not normative in that sense, and they are not based on freedom in that sense. So that's one major difference between why it is a category mistake to try to understand rationality after the laws of nature, after the laws of nature, or on the model of laws of nature, or the model of laws in any sense anyway. Okay, because with laws you need regularities and all that, but if rationality is based on freedom, then even if it has rules, those rules are specific to it in the sense that those rules are normative and not just based on regularities or the idea of regularity. Okay, so Klein is able to pass off the dilemma that he himself sees only at the cost of a deliberate category mistake. He requires of the logic of argumentation a task that could only be carried out by a nomological theory of observable behavior. And this looks like again a quotation from Klein, I think. Let me check. Yeah, so this is from Klein again, the same article he's quoting. I believe that and that's Klein speaking, I believe that in the systematic analysis of actual argumentation, as in every empirical analysis, so that's where he's treating actual argumentation and analysis as an empirical analysis. And probably for Habermas, empirical mean, that's what empirical mean, observation based on observation, or from the external perspective. Relatively fixed regularities can be found, so that would be laws according to which people argue. So when we try to, obviously Habermas is not saying that you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, but what he's saying is that you can't, based on regularities of the people's behavior, you can't base the notion of rationality on it, on that model. That's what he's saying. So to which people argue precisely, relatively fixed regularities can be found according to which people argue precisely the logic of argumentation. So he is trying to base logic of argumentation on the observation of regularities in people's behavior in how people actually argue. Habermas would say that the question of rationality is one step forward, that is how they should argue. And I believe, furthermore, that this concept covers much of what is usually understood as rationality of argumentation. So this, at least this quotation seemed to attest to Habermas's reading of Klein. Klein wants to cultivate the logic of argumentation as a nomological theory, and thus he has to assimilate. So that's again category mistake. Rules to causal regularities, reason to causes. So reason and causes, according to Habermas, are different categories, according to many philosophers. But there are philosophers who see reasons as form of causality. It doesn't mean that Habermas doesn't believe in causality of reason, but that causality is of totally different in kind from causality of nature. Okay. Paradoxically, the consequences of this kind arise from the attempt to sketch the logic of argumentation. What is the paradox? Paradoxically, consequences of this kind arise from the attempt to sketch the logic of argumentation exclusively from the perspective of the flow of communication processes, and to avoid also analyzing. So it arises from the attempt to sketch logic exclusively and avoid exclusively from the perspective of flow of communication processes, and avoid also analyzing consensus forming processes from the start as the achievement of rationally motivated argument and as the discursive redemption of validity claims. As a consequence of this restriction to the level of abstraction of rhetoric, the internal perspective of reconstructing validity connection is neglected. So that's what Habermas wanted to do. It's like, from the perspective of internal of the observation, you need to reconstruct what is being done in an argumentation in order to understand the rules of rationality. There is lacking a concept of rationality that would make it possible to establish internal relation between their standards and ours. And here theirs are, I guess, people and you are observing, and ours is the researcher. But obviously their and ours will take a much larger significance as we go along in this book. So between their standards and our, between what is valid for them and what is valid for us. So there is a lacking, what is lacking is the concept of rationality that would make it possible to establish internal relation between their standards. Because if you are just observing as an outsider for Habermas, you can just observe regularities. You can't actually make rational judgment whether they are correct or not. That's what I understand here. Okay, I think let's stop here, and we next time we'll start from here.